start from the beginning. How did you get started into the PAPEL PICADO?
I came to San Antonio. Actually, I came for a horse show, and I was doing equestrian portraits, and somebody invited me to the Riverwalk. And I went to dinner on the Riverwalk, and I fell in love with San Antonio. I know that sounds, everybody has that story, but that was how it touched me. And I thought, New Orleans doesn't have this. We have the French Quarter, but we don't have anything as beautiful as this Riverwalk. So I moved here a year later, and then I discovered the cut paper, the PAPEL PICADO, in an art gallery. And then I thought, now this is magical. It was tissue paper, pink, lavender blue tissue paper cut into shapes of skeletons laughing and doing everyday things like bicycling and getting married. I thought, now that is something. And then the shadow cast on the wall behind it was even more magical. And I like the PAPEL PICADO challenge. It has to look exactly like the person, but I can't use shading. I can use the wrinkles sometimes. The wrinkles help me because the wrinkles, like between your nose and your ears, well, you have to have something to connect. If it's cut paper, you need a series of connectors. So if you have somebody with wrinkles, well, you're going to use those. These are my brushes. These are my brushes and my palette, because I can cut it all out of different colors and then play with those colors later, you know, off-register them and overlap, and you never know what color is going to be most appropriate. They're all chisels. Most of them are wood chisels, but I've also got some chisels that I bought from Indonesia, and I love these. This one's from Bali. This one's from Java. They're tiny because they work very, very small, very delicate work in buffalo, water buffalo hide. It's leather, basically. It's called wayang kulit. So I learned how to make the shadow puppets out of leather, and then I'm applying those to the paper, because anything you can cut, wood or leather, you can also cut paper. You just have to keep them sharp. And then I've got underneath this is the Mexican tradition of using a lead pad to sort of soften the blow, because you know you're cutting very, very heavily onto these blades, and that will wear the blade down. But if it's taken in by this very soft, heavy metal, then that tends to soften the blow, so to speak, and you don't have to sharpen these all the time. You can see I've got some very, very big ones. This is the biggest one I have. My father gave me that. It was in his garage. So I just sharpen that up, and I can cover a lot of territory with that one. And then this I got at a hardware store. So I have a combination of straights and even tiny straights. Yeah, I've got some of those in the Indonesian ones. And then I've got curves, and I've got some heavy curves, some deep curves, half circle curves, and then barely a curve. And between all of these different shapes, I can make very intricate patterns. Out of 50 or so different chisels, I can make almost anything I want to make. Actually, that's why I wrote the book. That's why I wrote the book, because everywhere I went, nobody had a clue what it was. And if they knew what it was, they just assumed that it was die cut or made in China with some kind of laser cutting technique. So I had to write the book so that people would understand these are hand-cut artworks. And as you can see, I mean, the process is very tedious. But there are people in Mexico that master this, and they're doing it to supplement their income that they're making farming or whatever they're doing for their daily lives. And it's the middlemen that really make most of the money off of this. And I am not doing the sort of thing that they do in Mexico because I don't want to touch that market. I want that market to be there for them and thrive. I want to go on to other things, other applications of the technique that they are not doing there. And as far as the history of it, in the book, I have to speculate because there is nothing in print. I looked everywhere, in Mexico, Austin, Library of Congress. There was nothing about it. But just interviewing the artists and reading about other Mexican art forms and just observing in Mexico, I came to the conclusion that it was developed out of metal smithing, metal cutting. They use the exact same tools that you see here for the metal cutting. And they even use the lead pad. And the metal work was already being done by the time the Spanish colonists came over to the New World. And with them, with these ships coming from Spain, Philippines, China, were the beautiful European and Chinese lace. And those lace works were often used for altar coverings. And by the time that the indigenous Mexicans began to embrace the Catholic religion and enjoy the ceremonies in the churches, they wanted that lace. They wanted that lace to embellish their altars and tables and so on, but the poor villages couldn't afford it. But they did have the skill to do the metalwork. I'm talking lanterns, the beautiful lanterns that we're familiar with in Mexico, and the jewelry and so on. So they must have said, okay, let's use that Chinese paper that's coming over from China, which is nice and thin and colored and easy to cut. Let's use that to make altar coverings. And many of these altar coverings were white tissue paper, and to this day, they still call tissue paper
how to do
papel
this
china
technique with these
in Mexico. You ask for tissue
chisels.
paper, they don't know what
And
you're
he
talking
had-
about. Papel china is what the term
He
is.
had
And they
a
were
little
also
sort of
making stencils. They were getting stencils from China to make the embroidery work and other kinds of folk art forms. And so there was a heavy influence at one time of Chinese motifs, the flowers and the doves that we associate with in Mexican art. You can see the exact same thing in the Chinese art. So I put all that together and then added that then we get the Day of the Dead factored into it because of the influence of Jose Guadalupe Posada, who was a 19th century woodcut artist, woodcut, linoleum cut, and lithograph. Lithograph had just came on the scene, and he picked that up, and he was working for newspapers. And for Day of the Dead, he would do just little flyers that had very satirical descriptions of anybody, the Pope, priests, politicians, kings, queens, and anybody else, all shown as skeletons doing what they normally do. And it was a way to poke fun at death, because that's what Day of the Dead is all about. It's kind of a celebration of the next phase in life. That's the way it's seen in Mexico, and it's very healthy. The attitude prepares everybody for the ultimate, and it also is the great equalizer, because you can make fun of the king and queen. They have a lot more money than you do, but guess what? They're going to have the same fate in the end.